There are moments in life when you think you've already written your ending. You've packed up the last chapters, closed the book, and placed it carefully on a shelf where it can gather dust in peace. You tell yourself, this is enough. This is what I have. This is who I am now. And you learn to be okay with that. I thought I had done that. I was a mother first, a professional second, and somewhere far down the list, maybe 10th or 11th, I was still a woman with her own heart, her own dreams, her own quiet hopes that I'd learned not to speak out loud. New York City had become my sanctuary and my prison all at once. I could disappear into crowds on the subway, hide behind sunglasses in Washington Square Park, blend into the chaos of Soho on a Sunday morning. But I was also always visible, always watched, always one photograph away from becoming a headline I didn't write. The exhaustion wasn't from the work. It was from the performance. The smile at the right moment, the carefully chosen words in every interview, the constant awareness that even my silence could be interpreted, dissected, turned into a narrative I had no control over. I had learned to live with it, the price of the life I'd chosen, the life I'd built. But some nights, after my daughter fell asleep and the apartment grew quiet, I would sit by the window overlooking the city and wonder if I'd ever feel like just me again. Not Gigi Hadid the model, not Gigi the co-parent, not Gigi the brand, just Gigi. I didn't think anyone could see that version of me anymore. I'd hidden her so well, even I sometimes forgot she existed. But then came that night in October. It was one of those rare evenings when I'd agreed to go out. A small dinner party hosted by a mutual friend in Tribeca. Nothing flashy, nothing public, just good people, good food, and hopefully a few hours where I could let my guard down. I almost didn't go. I remember standing in my bedroom, staring at my closet, feeling that familiar weight in my chest that whispered, "Stay home, it's easier, it's safer." But my daughter was with her father that weekend, and the apartment felt too empty, too full of my own thoughts. So I went. The restaurant was tucked away on a quiet street, the kind of place where they don't take reservations from tourists and the waiters remember your name. Warm light spilled from the windows, and I could hear laughter before I even opened the door. I stepped inside, scanning the room for familiar faces, and that's when I saw him. Bradley Cooper. I knew of him, of course. Everyone did. But we'd never really spoken beyond polite hellos at industry events. He was standing near the bar, holding a glass of red wine, listening intently to someone's story with that focused expression he had, like the person talking was the only one in the room. He looked different than he did on screen, more tired, more real. There was a softness around his eyes that the camera never quite captured. Our eyes met for just a second, and he gave me a small nod, the kind of acknowledgement that said, "I see you, and I'm not going to make it weird." I appreciated that more than he knew. The dinner was beautiful. I sat between two friends and let myself relax into the conversation, the wine, the rhythm of people who weren't performing for each other. But every now and then, I'd catch Bradley's gaze across the table. Not staring, not flirting, just seeing. The way you look at someone when you recognize something familiar in them, something you don't have to name. When the evening ended and people began saying their goodbyes on the sidewalk, he approached me. The street was quiet, just the distant hum of traffic and the October wind pulling at the leaves. He said, "You doing okay?" He asked, his voice low and genuine. It was such a simple question, the kind people ask 100 times a day without really wanting an answer. But the way he said it, the way he waited, holding my gaze, I knew he actually wanted to know. I could have given him the easy answer, the reflex response I'd perfected over years of interviews and small talk. "I'm great. Busy, but great. How are you?" But I didn't. "Honestly," I said, surprising myself, "I don't really know." He nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense. He said, "Yeah, me neither." And just like that, something shifted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or violins or any of the things you see in movies, just a quiet understanding between two people standing on a sidewalk in Tribeca, both carrying more than they showed the world. He asked, "Can I walk you home?" I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust what it might mean, what people might say, what I might feel. But I was tired of being careful. So I said, "Yeah, I'd like that." We walked slowly through the streets of Lower Manhattan, the city glowing around us like 1,000 small promises. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. And when we reached my building and I turned to say goodnight, he just smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches your eyes, and said, "It was good to see you, Gigi. Really see you." I went upstairs and stood by my window again, looking out at the same city I'd looked at 1,000 times before, but this time something felt different. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't as invisible as I thought. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Bradley. I got your number from Sarah. Hope that's okay. There's a cafe in the West Village that makes the best almond croissants in the city. Thought you might want to escape for an hour. No pressure." I stared at the message for longer than I should have. My first instinct was to decline politely, to say I was busy, to protect the careful distance I'd worked so hard to maintain between myself and anything that could become complicated. But there was something about the way he'd phrased it, no pressure, that made me believe him. I texted back, "What time?" The cafe was exactly the kind of place I loved. Small, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop with mismatched chairs and plants in the windows. Bradley was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees and a brown paper bag that I assumed held the promised croissants. He stood when he saw me, and I noticed he looked nervous. Bradley Cooper, the man who'd been nominated for Oscars, who directed films, who commanded entire rooms with his presence, looked genuinely nervous to have coffee with me. It was oddly comforting. "You came?" he said, smiling. "You promised the best croissants in the city," I replied, sitting down. I had to fact-check that claim. He laughed, and the tension broke. We spent the first 10 minutes talking about inconsequential things, the weather, the neighborhood, a dog that walked past the window. But then, slowly, the conversation deepened. He asked me about my daughter, and I found myself telling him things I rarely shared, how I sometimes worried I wasn't giving her enough normalcy, how I wanted her to have the freedom to be a kid, to be bored, to be messy, without cameras documenting her childhood. "I think about that a lot," he said quietly. "With Leia, how do you give them a real life when yours is so not normal?" Leia was his daughter. I knew he shared custody with Irina Shayk, that he was deeply private about his family life. The fact that he brought her up, that he trusted me with that part of himself, felt significant. "You just do your best," I said, "and you hope it's enough." He nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "That's the hardest part, isn't it? Hoping it's enough." We sat in silence for a moment, and I realized how rare this was. To sit with someone and not have to fill every second with words, to let the quiet exist without it feeling uncomfortable. "Can I ask you something?" he said eventually. "Sure." "The other night, when I asked if you were okay and you said you didn't know," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Did you mean that, or were you just being polite?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw that he wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking because he understood, because he'd felt the same way. "I meant it," I said. "I've spent so much energy being fine that I forgot what okay actually feels like." He exhaled slowly, like I'd just said something he'd been thinking for years. "Yeah, that's exactly it." We talked for 2 hours about the parts of our lives that looked perfect from the outside but felt fragile on the inside, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw you as a version of yourself you weren't sure existed, about the fear of starting over, of letting someone in, of risking the peace you'd fought so hard to build. When we finally left the cafe, the sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of amber and rose. We walked together towards the subway, neither of us in a hurry to end the conversation. "Can we do this again?" he asked as we reached the station entrance. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." He smiled, and this time there was no nervousness in it, just warmth. "Good," he said, "because I'm not done fact-checking your taste in coffee yet." I laughed and headed down the stairs, feeling lighter than I had in months. But as I rode the train home, a small knot of anxiety formed in my chest, because I knew what happened when two people in our positions started spending time together. The photos, the speculation, the stories written by people who didn't know us, didn't see the quiet moments, didn't understand that sometimes connection isn't about grand gestures. It's about finding someone who lets you breathe. I didn't want that scrutiny. Not for me, and especially not for my daughter. But I also didn't want to stop. That was the hardest part, knowing that choosing to see him again meant risking everything I'd worked so hard to protect. The privacy, the normalcy, the carefully constructed life where I controlled the narrative. When I got home, I found my daughter asleep on the couch, a book open on her chest. Her father had dropped her off earlier than expected. I carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood in the doorway watching her breathe. She was my first priority, my only priority. But as I walked back to my room, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Bradley had looked at me in that cafe. Not like I was someone to be admired or photographed or analyzed, but like I was someone worth knowing. And maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to want that too. We fell into a rhythm over the next few weeks. Coffee on Tuesday mornings, long walks along the Hudson River on Sunday afternoons when our daughters were with their other parents, late-night texts that started as simple check-ins and evolved into conversations about everything and nothing. Books we'd read, movies we'd loved as kids, the strange isolation of being known by millions but understood by few. It was easy with him. That was the most surprising part. I had expected it to be complicated, loaded with the weight of who we were in the world. But when it was just the two of us, walking through Riverside Park as the leaves turned gold and rust, we weren't Gigi and Bradley. We were just two people trying to figure out how to be themselves again. Still, I was careful. I didn't tell many people. I didn't post about it. I made sure we went to places where we wouldn't be photographed. Quiet neighborhoods, early morning hours, the kinds of spots where locals went and tourists didn't. But then came the first photo. We'd been walking through the West Village on a Wednesday afternoon. It was one of those perfect autumn days when the air smells like cinnamon and wood smoke, and the light falls in golden slants between the buildings. We weren't holding hands. We weren't doing anything remotely romantic. We were just walking, talking about a documentary he'd watched the night before. I didn't see the photographer. I never do. But Bradley did. I felt him tense beside me, saw his jaw tighten. He didn't say anything, but I knew. That small shift in his energy, that sudden awareness of being watched, I recognized it because I'd lived it my entire adult life. "It's fine," I said quietly, more to reassure myself than him. "Let's just keep walking." We did. But the ease between us had fractured, just slightly, enough to remind us that this, whatever this was, didn't exist in a vacuum. The photos went up that evening. By the next morning, they were everywhere. Gigi Hadid and Bradley Cooper, new romance heating up? Inside Gigi and Bradley's secret relationship. Are they dating? Body language expert weighs in. I didn't read the articles. I'd learned long ago not to. But I saw the headlines, the comments, the endless speculation from people who thought they knew us because they'd seen us on screens and in magazines. My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. "You okay?" I didn't know how to answer that because I wasn't okay,
But I also couldn't explain why. It wasn't about the photos themselves. It was about what they represented. The end of something private. The beginning of something public. The loss of control over my own story. I called him instead of texting back. "Hey," he answered immediately. "Hey." A pause. Then, "Talk to me." I sat down on my couch, pulling my knees to my chest. I knew this would happen. I knew the second we started spending time together that people would notice, but knowing it and living it are different things. I know. It's just, I struggled to find the words. It's just, I've worked so hard to keep my daughter out of this, to give her a life that's hers, not mine. And now there are articles speculating about you and me, and I know it's only a matter of time before they start talking about her too, about us as a family, about things that aren't real. "We don't have to do this," he said quietly. "If it's too much—" "That's the problem," I interrupted. "I don't want to stop. I just want it to be ours, not theirs." Another pause. Longer this time. "What if we just keep doing what we're doing? We don't confirm anything. We don't deny anything. We just live our lives and let them think whatever they want to think. Can it really be that simple?" "Probably not," he admitted. "But I don't have a better answer, and I'm not ready to walk away from this. From you." My throat tightened. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling my heart beat. "Me neither," I whispered. "Okay," he said. "Then we figure it out together." We talked for another hour, making plans to be more careful, to protect our time together while still allowing it to exist. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. When I hung up, I felt steadier. Not because the problem was solved, but because I wasn't facing it alone. The next few weeks were harder. More photos surfaced, more articles were written. My management team called, asking if I wanted to release a statement. Friends reached out, some supportive, some concerned. My ex-husband texted, asking if I was being careful, if I'd thought about how this might affect our daughter. I had. I thought about it constantly. But I also thought about the way Bradley looked at me when we were alone. The way he listened without interrupting. The way he understood the specific loneliness of being seen but not known. And I thought about what I'd told myself for so long, that I didn't have space for this, that I'd given up on finding someone who could exist in my complicated life without making it more complicated. But what if I'd been wrong? What if the right person didn't simplify your life? They just made it feel less heavy. One evening, Bradley came over to my apartment. It was the first time he'd been inside, and I was nervous, in a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager. I'd cleaned obsessively, lit candles, changed my outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater. Something that said I didn't try too hard, while definitely having tried too hard. He showed up with a bag of groceries. "I thought we could cook," he said, smiling. "I make a mean pasta carbonara. Well, decent. Edible, at least." I laughed, relieved. "You really know how to sell it." We moved into the kitchen, and he started pulling out ingredients. Eggs, pancetta, pecorino cheese. I watched him work, noticing the way he moved with quiet confidence, the way he narrated what he was doing, like he was hosting his own cooking show. "The trick is to take the pan off the heat before you add the eggs. Otherwise, you get scrambled eggs, and that's a different dish entirely." "Noted," I said, leaning against the counter. "Is this how you charm all the women? Cooking lessons?" He glanced up, grinning. "Is it working?" "Maybe." We ate at my small kitchen table, the city glowing through the windows. The pasta was actually good. Better than decent. Better than edible. And the conversation flowed the way it always did with him. Easy and honest and real. Halfway through the meal, I heard a key in the door. My daughter. She wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow, but her father must have dropped her off early. I stood quickly, my heart racing. Not because I was ashamed of Bradley being here, but because I hadn't prepared her. I hadn't explained. She walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and stopped when she saw us. "Hey, baby," I said. trying to keep my voice light. "You're home early." She looked at Bradley, then at me, then back at Bradley. "Hi," she said cautiously. "Hi," Bradley said, standing. "I'm Bradley. Your mom and I were just having dinner. I made too much pasta. Want some?" Enjoying the story? Hit the like button, subscribe, drop your comment, and turn on the notifications. Let's keep going.
I didn't expect my daughter to like him right away. I'd braced myself for questions, for skepticism, for the protective walls that kids build when they sense their world might be changing, but she surprised me. Over the next few weeks, she warmed to Bradley in a way that felt natural, unforced. He never tried too hard, never positioned himself as anything more than a friend who occasionally stopped by with takeout or helped with homework when I was overwhelmed. One Saturday afternoon, the three of us went to Central Park. It wasn't planned as some big introduction or a statement. Bradley had texted me that morning saying he was taking Leah to the conservatory garden and asked if we wanted to join. My daughter loved the gardens, and I thought it might be nice for her to see Bradley in a context that included his own daughter, to understand that he wasn't just some new person in my life, but someone who was also navigating parenthood, also trying to protect something precious. The girls hit it off immediately. They ran ahead of us, collecting fallen leaves and pointing out sculptures, while Bradley and I walked behind them, close enough to keep watch, but far enough to let them have their own world. "She's really great," Bradley said, nodding toward my daughter. "Thank you," I said, feeling that familiar swell of pride mixed with protectiveness. She's been through a lot of changes. I worry about her sometimes. "She seems happy. You're doing something right." "I hope so." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching the girls. Then Bradley spoke again, his voice quieter. "I haven't introduced Leah to anyone since Irina and I split. This is new for me, too. I wasn't sure how to do it, or if I even should." I looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his admission. And? "And it feels right," he said simply. "With you, it feels right." My chest tightened. I wanted to say something profound, something that matched the weight of what he just shared, but all I could manage was, "It feels right to me, too." That evening, after the girls had worn themselves out and we'd said goodbye at the park entrance, I took my daughter home. She was unusually quiet on the subway, staring out the window as the stations blurred past. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. Then, after a long pause, "I like Bradley." "Yeah?" "Yeah. He's nice, and he's funny, and he didn't try to be my dad or anything weird like that." I felt a lump form in my throat. "That's good, because he's not trying to be anyone's dad. He's just someone I care about." She looked at me, her eyes steady and wise beyond their years. "Are you happy, Mom?" The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wasn't used to my daughter asking it. I was supposed to be the one worrying about her happiness, not the other way around. "Yeah," I said, surprised by how true it felt. "I think I am." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder as the train rocked gently beneath us. "Good. You should be happy." That night, after she'd gone to bed, I called Bradley. "She likes you," I told him. "She said that?" "She said you're nice and funny and that you didn't try to be her dad." He laughed softly. "High praise." "It really is." We talked for a while longer, about the day, about how nervous we'd both been, about how surprisingly easy it had been. And then Bradley said something that shifted everything. "I've been thinking," he began, "about us, about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and I don't want to hide anymore." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm tired of sneaking around, tired of worrying about who sees us. I want to just be with you, openly, without all this fear." "Bradley."
I know what you're going to say, that it's complicated, that we have kids to protect, that the attention will be intense. And you're right, it will be all of those things. But I think we can handle it. Together. I was silent, my mind racing, because he was asking me to do the one thing I'd been terrified of since the first photo appeared, to stop controlling the narrative, to let people see us, to risk everything I'd built for the possibility of something real. What if it doesn't work? I asked, my voice small. What if it does? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about what it would mean to choose this, to choose him, knowing what it would cost. The privacy we'd fought for, the careful boundaries we'd maintained, the illusion of control. And then something happened that made the decision for me. A tabloid published an article claiming that Bradley and I were engaged. It was completely false. We hadn't even called ourselves a couple yet, but it didn't matter. The story spread like wildfire. My phone exploded with texts from friends, family, colleagues, all asking if it was true. My daughter heard about it at school. Someone made a TikTok video analyzing my engagement ring, which was just a ring I'd worn for years. I was furious. Not at Bradley, but at the entire machine that fed on speculation and manufactured narratives. At the way our lives had been turned into content, our relationship into a commodity. But I was also exhausted. Exhausted from fighting. Exhausted from hiding. Exhausted from pretending that we could exist in the shadows forever. That night, Bradley came over. I had asked him to. I needed to see him in person to say what I needed to say face to face. I read the article, he said as soon as I opened the door. Everyone did, I replied, stepping aside to let him in. We sat on the couch, not touching, both of us carrying the weight of everything unsaid. I'm sorry, he said. I know this isn't what you wanted. It's not your fault, I said. It's just, this is what our lives are. This is the cost of being who we are. So what do we do? I took a breath, feeling the answer settle into place. We stop fighting it. We stop trying to control something we can't control. We just live. He looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. You mean that? I think I do. I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of losing you because I was too scared to try. He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. We'll figure it out, he said. One day at a time. One day at a time, I repeated. And in that moment, I realized that maybe the point wasn't to have all the answers. Maybe it was just to have the courage to take the first step, trusting that the rest would unfold as it was meant to. It's been 6 months since that night. 6 months of learning how to be in a relationship while the world watches. 6 months of messy, imperfect, beautiful growth. It hasn't been easy. There are still photographers, still headlines, still people who think they know our story better than we do. But something has changed. We don't fight it anymore. We don't hide. We just live our lives. Going to the park with our daughters, cooking dinner in my apartment, stealing quiet moments in a loud city. My daughter asks about Bradley now. She wants to know if he's coming to her school play, if he's staying for dinner, if he can teach her how to make his famous carbonara. And Bradley's daughter, Leia, has started calling me by name instead of Kai's mom, which feels like its own small victory. We're not rushing anything. We're not making grand announcements or planning some big future we're not ready for. We're just here, in this moment, figuring it out as we go. Because here's what I've learned. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't pause until you've healed all your wounds, answered all your questions, built all your walls. It just keeps moving. And you have to decide whether you're going to move with it or stay frozen in fear. For so long, I thought protecting myself meant keeping people out. But Bradley taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. Not because they promise to fix everything, but because they're willing to sit with you in the mess and uncertainty and still choose to stay. I used to think I didn't have space in my life for love, that I'd used up my chance, that motherhood and career and healing were enough to fill me. But love doesn't ask for space, it creates it. It expands your life instead of shrinking it. It reminds you that you're not just a mother or a professional or a person defined by your past. You're also someone who deserves to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved for exactly who you are. And maybe that's the real story here. Not about two celebrities who found each other in a city full of people, but about two people who learned that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only way to truly connect. That taking risks doesn't mean being reckless. It means being brave enough to believe in possibility. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if this relationship will last forever or if we're building something that will eventually run its course. But I know that right now, in this moment, I'm happier than I've been in years. And that has to count for something. My daughter told me something last week that I keep coming back to. We were walking home from school, and out of nowhere she said, "Mom, I'm glad you found someone who makes you smile like that." "Like what?" I asked. She said, "Like you mean it." And she was right. I do mean it now. The smile, the laughter, the hope, it's all real. Not performed, not manufactured for the cameras or the headlines or the people watching from the outside. Just real. That's what Bradley gave me. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, just the permission to be myself, completely and unapologetically, without fear of judgment or abandonment. And in a world that constantly demands we be more, do more, prove more, that gift is everything. So if you're reading this and wondering whether it's worth it to take a chance on love again, to open yourself up after you've been hurt, to risk the safety of your carefully constructed life for the unknown, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. The unknown is where life actually happens. The messy, imperfect, terrifying unknown is where you discover who you really are and what you're truly capable of feeling. Don't wait until you're ready. You might never be ready. Just take the first step, and then the next, and then the next. Trust that you're stronger than you think, braver than you know, and worthy of every beautiful, complicated, real thing that life has to offer. Because you are. We all are.
If you watched until here, thank you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your messages. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you never miss another story like this. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. Any amount helps a lot. Link in the pinned comment.